Good morning and welcome. I'm John Kelker, president of your Springfield Citizens Club. It's a pleasure to have you with us this morning and to welcome those who are watching on Facebook or will be watching a recorded version. I want to send a special thank you to Lisa Stone, who sponsored this morning's coffee. October marks our fourth month of the 2022-23 year for the Citizens Club. And I want to remind everybody, anyone who has not paid your annual dues, it is very important to the club. If you have the opportunity, please see Carol Sutton in the back of the room. If today isn't the right time, please reach out to me. We are making a special effort to make sure we can pay the bills, make sure this gets on Facebook, and as they say, keep the lights on. We have a wonderful program today. It's neat to see so many different faces because of the issue that's so important to us and our community. We will hear from the representatives who have worked with others to develop a strategic plan to address homelessness in Sangamon and Springfield and Sangamon County. Joining us this morning are Josh Sabo, coordinator of the Heartland Continuum of Care, Ricky Reese, a board member of Springfield Sangamon County Strategic Plan to address homelessness, and Jilnita Johnson, Director of Recruitment, Development, and Retention at Helping Hands. Our presenters have a PowerPoint, and to get us started in just a minute, I'll turn it over to Josh Sabo. And I wanted to let you know that following the presentation, I'll have a couple of questions, but I'm hoping there's time that we can open it up to the entire audience, because this is important for the community to understand what's being presented and how we can all be a part of finding the right solutions. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Josh Sabo.
John, thank you, and thank you to the Citizens Club for providing this space to focus on the issue of homelessness. Over the past decade, we've seen the number of people experiencing homelessness in our community continuously increase. Meanwhile, federal funding has decreased by 40%. Our local data gives us a good insight into the challenge of homelessness in Springfield and Sangamon County. On a given night, around 264 people experience homelessness. Over the course of a year, our system of care provides support for around 1,142 people. Within our community, there are only 230 permanent housing opportunities. So whenever you hear that type of disparity, 1,142 people experiencing homelessness over the course of a year, 230 permanent housing opportunities available, you end up with a statistic like this. Over the course of their experience of homelessness, only about 16 people who access shelter or engage street outreach while living on the street ever get an opportunity to enter into one of those permanent housing opportunities. As a community, our system to address homelessness is stuck. And we all recognize, I would suspect we're all here because we know that things need to change. Over the last 14 months, there's been a group of stakeholders from throughout our community who have been engaged in the work of creating a framework for that change. As we've gone about that work, we've landed on 4 key strategies to help move our community forward. Those are, the first one, create new supportive housing opportunities to help people in their homelessness. Housing is ultimately what ends homelessness. And as we showed it with the data, there's nowhere near enough opportunity in our community. The second strategy is to improve the effectiveness of our system and connecting people to the support and care that they need. The third strategy revolves around increasing partnerships to improve access to healthcare, jobs, re-entry services, and other support that helps people navigate the transitions that they might run into throughout the course of their life. And then the fourth one is to develop infrastructure to support growth and improvement in the homelessness system and to actually meet the goals of this plan. As we've gone about this work, nobody's interested in a 30-page document, and I know that our community is not interested in a 30-page document that doesn't manifest itself in action, right? And so what we lay out here, what we plan to talk about this morning, and the work that we are already engaged in doing is to ensure that the system changes, that the opportunities change in our community. Our goal, ultimately, is to reach what's called functional zero. And our goal is to get there by January of 2028. Functional zero means that our community will have the housing and service resources to support all people that become homeless to exit within 30 days. Right now, that statistic is somewhere around the 90-day mark, and the reality is there's a lot of people who spend a significant longer time than that in the experience of homelessness. As we go about creating the system and pulling together the resources that can meet that goal, we will reach functional zero for chronic homelessness and unsheltered homelessness. And in the course of doing so, I think we have the opportunity to really transform our community. One of the things that I've been grateful for as we've engaged the community around this is that the questions that we often get are built on the foundational understanding that things have to change. Improvements have to be made. And oftentimes, as we talk to the community, people want to know, how can we support? Along with that, the question that we often get is, can this really work? Is this really possible? As a community, we've seen different efforts, we've seen different projects, we've seen all kinds of things come to the forefront and then ultimately not materialize. It's a fair question. And so this morning, what I would love to do is for you to hear from two people who have a tremendous amount of experience with the impact that the right supports and the right opportunities can make for people experiencing homelessness in our community. Jill Johnson has invested a lot of her time, a lot of her energy, a lot of her life in providing support for people to end their homelessness. And so Jill, I'm grateful that you're willing to share of your experience with us this morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Jill Johnson, and I am the Director of Retention, Recruitment, Director, and Development at Helping Hands of Springfield. They call me R2D2 for short. That makes it a little easier to get on the card, but that's what we're doing. Been there about a year. My background is that I spent about 14 years being a homeless case manager under MBH. And coming into Helping Hands, which is historically known as the local shelter for men 18 to 80, I like to tell everybody. But we have pivoted into a very vital social service agency directed at helping the homeless and dedication towards the housed. In talking about how to support people and into their homeless and what does that look like, it looks like a lot of things. A lot of people have ideas on how to help the homeless and what the best way to support is, and no way is wrong. And there are a lot of right ways. For some people, it's the donation of a meal or blessing someone with things that are not useful in their homes anymore, and that's absolutely great. For some people, it's investment of time. They want to come and talk. What our agency has moved towards, and several other agencies in the community, is the aspect of education, collaboration, and support, which are very, very helpful in getting towards stability and helping those that need to be housed stay housed. The turn has been towards a housing first model, which means exactly what you hear, housing first. We get a person housed and then we come back around and address the issues, whether it be addiction, mental health, legal issues, parenting issues, anything on those lines. Not always easy, but definitely doable. And in those things that we use case management. I'm a firm supporter of case management because our case managers are the liaisons and educators that are teaching people things that we take for granted in knowledge. Everyone doesn't know how to be a good neighbor. Everybody doesn't know how to be an effective community member. Some people don't even know the basics of keeping an apartment clean and keeping your neighbor from calling the police on you. It takes a lot for a person to go into a situation where they could be chronically homeless, they could be generationally homeless. There are a lot of families that have always lived together, and they don't really see that as homelessness, but if you look at it as a whole, if great-grandma always lived with grandma, who lived with the daughters, and it goes all the way down, they have generational homelessness because nobody has ever taught them to be at a higher level of stability. So what we do with case management is we create action plans that are client-driven. We talk to them about budgeting, the importance of getting services to address your mental health, your addictions, your legalities, if you're not capable of parenting well. So we look through those things. We look into the fact that housing is good health. People who are homeless have shorter lifespans. That has been proven. They have more degenerative diseases, they have less health care, and it's harder to live stable when you don't feel good and you don't think well. When it comes to case management, there's actual planning, action plans. There's somebody with you every step of the way to get you where you need to be. And you can look at it as a parent-child relationship. We take for granted the things we teach our children. If no one ever taught you those milestones of after adulthood of employment, housing, and how things work, you don't know. So, we work around the 3 C's of case management, which are coordination, communication, and cooperation. Several agencies work hand in hand. With Helping Hands, we work very closely with all the agencies because we can't do what we do without the support of other agencies. So I think that's all I have. And I'll pass it on to Ricky to give you his life experience.
Jill. Good morning. My name is Ricky Reese, and I lived homeless for 5 years. And the reason I became homeless is because I was going through a divorce at the time. I lost my mother, and I lost one of my sisters at the same time. And it was like I couldn't deal with it no more. And I gave up and started drinking. And when I started drinking, I didn't have nowhere to go because nobody wanted me at their house. My sisters didn't want me there. My children didn't want me there. Nobody, no relatives or nothing. So I had no choice but to be out in the street. And during the time I was out in the street, some of the things I encountered, I almost lost all of my fingers from being frostbitten. Also, I have plates in both sides of my face with screws from where I was assaulted. Also, I had 60 stitches in my jaw from where I was cut with a carpet cutter and had to have 60 stitches. Also, I had 12 staples on my neck across my jugular vein because I was assaulted again. And I just thank God for being here today. I was found in the field, dead. A lady saw me, and she called the paramedics just in time. I was assaulted and robbed. She called the paramedics. I woke up a week later in the hospital. Out of a coma, I had tubes all in me, breathing for me, everything. So I know what it's like to be out there. I encountered having to go and get in dumpsters to get something to eat because nobody would give me nothing to eat at their house. I couldn't go to no restaurant and ask for something to eat because when you're homeless, they don't want you in the restaurants because they say you disturbing the customers because of the way you're dressed or the way you look. No establishment wants you in there. And I went through so much. As many times as I went to the hospital, I would leave the hospital, and when my jaws got broken, the doctor asked me, he said, "Do you want us to wire your jaws up?" And I told him no. I told him no because I knew if he wired my jaws up, I wouldn't be able to drink. And I was ready to leave the hospital, and I told him to just put the plates in with the screws. And right to this day, that's what I have in my jaws on both sides, plates and screws. And when I left the hospital, the first place I went was to the liquor store. I still had my bag of medicine that I had got at the hospital. And I didn't even think about what was wrong with me or nothing. I just wanted to get that drink. But the reason why is because that hurt. And I had to try to hide that hurt and that pain. And before I knew it, the alcohol wasn't hiding it good enough. So I had to try something else. So I went to pills. That wasn't good enough. So I kept going, but nothing would hide it. Nothing would hide it. I would sleep in parks. I would sleep in bathrooms, those little bathrooms they put out. I would sleep in those. I would sleep in dumpsters in the wintertime. Wherever I can get out of the coldness, I would sleep there. My sister, she was riding down the street one day and she saw me sleep in a field, and she got out of her car and she filmed it. And when I got my life together, she showed me that video. I didn't even know she had it. She showed me that video of me laying in that grass, sleep, because I didn't have nowhere to go, because nobody would let me in. But now, where I am today, I have my grandchildren back in my life. I have my children in my life. I have my sisters in my life, because I don't have no brothers, so I have my sisters in my life, and it's all because, I'll say it's because of I learned to live again, and that's through helping hands. One night I was sleeping in a boat. I would stand across the street, and I would wait for the people to turn their living room light off. That way I know they're getting ready to go to bed. And I would go across the street, and I would climb in their boat and go down in their boat and sleep in there. And I would get up in the morning before they would and get out of that boat so that they wouldn't know that I was in their boat sleeping. And I did this for probably about a week. And then it got so cold outside, I went to Helping Hands about 3 days in a row. But once I heard the rules, and I knew I wasn't gonna be able to get out to go drink or nothing like that, I left. But something kept me going back every day for 3 days. And on that third day, I decided to stay. And I stayed, and during the time I was there, I learned so much about me. I learned so much about what caused me to be homeless, how to deal with it. Every morning I would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, every morning. I would pray, I would study my Bible, and just ask God, when I leave here, you give me the strength to help others the way you just helped me. And that's what I've been doing ever since I left Helping Hands. And the director of Helping Hands, after they got me a place, she came to my house and she told me she wanted me to work at Helping Hands. And I worked for Helping Hands for about 1.5 years. And then I left there, and I've been doing this ever since, because when I was younger, I knew God had a calling on my life to do something, because I couldn't stand to see somebody talk about somebody else or hurting somebody else. It bothered me. And as I got older, I finally started realizing, okay, that's what it is. God wanted me to help other people. And that's what I've been doing. And today, I'm an advocate for those that's less fortunate. And thank you.
I want to thank both of you, because you're an inspiration to me, and I hope all those here who either watch or present get a sense of that. And Ricky, I know, part of your story with Helping Hands involved the rapid rehousing program, and a program that provides a housing subsidy and case management for a limited amount of time. And that support is what allowed Ricky to, in part, what allowed Ricky to be here in front of you sharing his story of success. And the reality as a community is every person's story is unique. Every person's experiences are unique, and the exact same thing that works for one person is not going to work for every person. But what we aim to create here is not something novel to our community. In fact, it's something that other communities have been doing now for almost 20 years. So we're not innovating. What we're doing is taking best practices, taking what's been proven to work elsewhere, and figuring out how to make it work in our community. And our hope is that in 5 years, we're telling a lot more stories like Ricky's. There's a lot more people in our community that are living lives where they're thriving, where they have what they need to experience stability, and then to contribute for the good of our community. It's absolutely possible. Homelessness is a complex challenge, but it's solvable. And my sense is that as a community, we haven't believed that. And it's time to believe that. And it's time to wrap our actions, to wrap our resources and our support around what works, and truly move forward as a community. We can create in a community where the experience of homelessness is rare, where it's brief, and where it's non-recurring. We can shift where our system and our resources are spent from addressing crisis after crisis to going upstream and preventing homelessness in the first place. When we get there, when we do that, our community will be a significantly healthier place for all of us to live. And not only that, it will shift the resources that are being spent in reactionary ways, and we'll be helping people live a healthier life. So our plan lays out the framework for what to do, how to do that, how to get there. And unquestionably, there's a tremendous amount of work ahead of us. There's significant resources that are needed to build these programs, to scale these programs, to hire many more Jills so that we can tell more stories like Ricky's. So we're asking for you to join us. We're asking for you to have an open mind. We're asking for you to support us. A couple of next steps as you think about that before we open up some space for questions. If you go to our website at heartlandcontinuum.com, you can review the full plan there. Additionally, we'll be creating more resources there to help provide education about what's in the plan and what it means. Additionally, other ways to get engaged or just to be more aware of the work that's going on, you can go to that website and you can subscribe to our email list. You can like us on Facebook. We've also created an hour-long training called the Community Ambassador Training. It really works to create a foundation for what we're trying to accomplish. It communicates about what a housing first approach is, where our community is, and where we're trying to go. So those are a few things that you could do in the coming days as you wait to hear more about the implementation of this plan. Additionally, my email address is on the screen, and I would be happy to connect with any of you at any time and answer questions about the work that we're attempting to do. But John, I'll hand it back to you, sir.
Thank you, thank you. And if I can, let us have one more round of applause for all three of our presenters. I wanted to ask a couple of questions. You've mentioned a little bit about funding and resources. What do you know now about the funding and resources that are in place to help you be successful?
One thing we know is that we don't currently have enough. So that would be the first thing. I just want to keep starting with that because it's significant. Other communities like our size, that are about our size, get roughly 3 times the amount we get from the federal government. That's one thing the community needs to be aware of. And some of that has to do with historic poor performance of our system. So the work of doing this strategic plan and rebuilding our system, it provides an avenue for us to pursue additional funding. In the meantime, that funding's not going to materialize overnight. What we know is that the cost to support a person in permanent housing is a little over $12,000 a year. And so there are some unique opportunities we have in front of us right now as a community. The city of Springfield received around $2.4 million in what's called home ARP funds. I don't expect you to know all about that or care a great deal, but the reality is those resources could be allocated in ways that provide a rental subsidy and case management. And so we'll work with the city to advocate and hopefully line those dollars up with housing campaigns. One of our goals in the plan is to do a 30-person housing campaign in the spring of 2023, and really to focus that on people who have experienced unsheltered homelessness. So as Ricky tells his story, both about what he went through and what it looks like for him to now be stably housed, those are funds that can help us get there. Additionally, we're going to need local support. We're going to need donors to help us hire more case managers and create that rental subsidy in additional ways as well. In addition to that, though, we need resources to work on the prevention side of things, to create diversion programs. And one of the things that will really be a focus over the next 6 months is to put some of these foundational programs in place. And for a community like ours, we're going to look to engage consultants around helping us to build some of these programs and train local organizations, because we are looking at transitioning and transforming the system of care. So there is some capacity building that has to take place.
And one more, at least, that I know I'm sensitive to. You talked about more physical resources for the housing. Unfortunately, this community has dealt with the issue of not in my backyard.
Sure.
How do you believe this strategic plan can address those, and what should the community anticipate in terms of the physical resources that might be needed?
Absolutely. That dynamic is not unique to us. That's a dynamic that pops up in every community in the country. And so while we are looking at creating several hundred housing opportunities, sometimes that will mean creating new units. For example, Helping Hands, along with the Illinois Housing Development Authority, is working to create a 22-unit development on Park Street. we need more developments like that. So in terms of a physical footprint, we'll be engaging partners in hopes of bringing a development like that to our community every year for the next 5 years. And those will need to be located in our community, right? They'll need to have a physical footprint. And so our plan is to really engage around education, to really kind of put resources around what it looks like to engage a neighborhood and to talk about what we're creating. And really throughout the plan and throughout the implementation, a strong emphasis is on including people with lived experience. I think that's something we haven't done well enough historically, and I think it's a significant part of reducing some of the stigma attached to homelessness. Really, we're providing housing, and as neighbors, we really don't get to choose our neighbors. That's discrimination, right? So connected to that, we plan to work with landlords, really use units, which is currently what's happening, right? There's landlords that are partnering with us and units all across the community in all of our neighborhoods, likely already. So we plan to expand upon those efforts too.
Okay. And I had a question and I've lost it. I know, you've mentioned the 5 years, and we could think 10 years, but to whom do you think you'll be reporting in 18 months or 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? Are there benchmarks that you're looking to achieve, and people to whom, again, your funders or some of the organizations that helped you bring this to
Absolutely.
where we are today?
The fourth strategy in the plan really sort of goes into this. And so if you look through the plan, there are some metrics about what we aim to create year by year, and a graph that'll sort of show you what that would look like if we get there. One piece of the infrastructure is we're creating a new strategy board. That board would include, the mayor, the county chairman, the Capital Township trustee, other partners. And so that new strategy board will really have the task of saying, are we hitting our goals? What do we need to hit our goals? But in addition to that fourth strategy aims to create clear community data dashboards. So that what we're doing is on as real time of a basis as possible, communicating to the community both the issue and where progress is or is not being made. So that's another element that we'll aim to create over the course of the next few months.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you. I knew I had a couple of questions, but because of the large audience and the interested people, I do want to open it up to questions, and I can't see him because of the light, but Norm Sims is standing in the back. Norm has a microphone, and it looks like Jane has a question.
Jane has a question.
This is directed, I think, to Josh. You mentioned the $12,000 to support a person in housing with supportive services, et cetera. What are we spending now because of emergency visits to the hospital, et cetera? What does the cost our community today versus what you're saying, $12,000?
Yeah, Jane, that's a great question. We haven't done that analysis in our community, but that type of research project has been done probably over 10 times across our country. And as they do that, the figure that comes back is, I think the lowest figure I've seen is around $39,000. So that means on average, to not address homelessness or to address it in reactive ways, such as creating more emergency shelter, more police response, more emergency room response. In general, our community is spending roughly about $40,000 a year to not ultimately end homelessness, while the solution could be created for a little over $12,000.
Good morning. My question is, obviously homelessness is real, and there are different situations why folks are. I hear you speaking of putting people in homes, but I haven't heard anything about how we return these people back to some normalcy, getting a job, supporting themselves. So identifying, number one, whether they're able to, mental health I'm speaking of, and then the rest would be why aren't they able to go back into the workforce and support themselves, and along with support behind that from the community.
Absolutely. Workforce development is another, in the third strategy, there's a piece about that. And the key to that is really what Jill talked about. Those case management services, they're really, the goal of that case manager is to meet a person where they are, to connect them with the supports they need, including workforce development, training. Stability in housing is going to require increasing income. So sometimes that might come from non-employment income, but overwhelmingly, people are looking for an opportunity to invest their gifts in the community. And so those case managers are working to prepare people for jobs and to connect people to jobs. And if you know employers that are willing to work with case managers, we certainly would love to connect with them as well.
Hi, my name is Joe O'Neill, and I support this plan wholeheartedly. I'd just like to briefly say that I have a niece from Chicago that is here today. I'm expecting a call anytime to check in to rehab. Drugs are a big issue in this community, and you can get them on any street corner, any neighborhood. You can get them anywhere. And that's from heroin, you name it, full buffet. What I don't see here is the crux of one of the biggest problems is mental health. Now, I will tell you this. My niece has a personality disorder that is a very serious person. She can't adapt into new housing. Yesterday, I called Memorial. To their psychiatrist, that's what she needs. Medicaid is not accepted. How can you, where is mental health in all this? I mean, we talk about it, but what are we doing?
Yeah, that's a great question too. And Jill, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know given your background, I'll just say quickly, the goal is that those services are infused throughout all of this, and so that third strategy kind of focuses on that integration. But kind of Joe, some of what you point to is when you think about just where our society is as a whole, can people access the healthcare that they need? Is there enough of that? And often the system to address homelessness is catching people who might have fallen through other systems and need additional support than what can be provided. And that will remain an ongoing challenge that there certainly won't be a quick fix for. But that being said, the effort is to include those services, and from emergency shelter to street outreach workers are trained. Certainly case managers are working to connect people. And I probably stole the thunder that I just asked you, but you have a better, experience.
I just want to say mental health is definitely at the table in all aspects of what we're doing. They are embedded in the shelters. That's how Helping Hands got me. I was embedded in the shelter for 14 years. Any collaboration that we're doing, they are engaged. They are in the jails. They are working with the different social service agencies. It's a shortage of everything. Just as there's a shortage of housing, there are a shortage of mental health workers, but they are there. And I can very passionately say in this area, they are at the table. Sometimes you don't get to see and you don't know what you don't know. So they are working very closely with the local rehabs as well. Being an addictions counselor by trade, I do understand how important mental health plays into that, because as Ricky explained, sometimes you're trying to self-medicate what the problem is and you're not really getting to that. So be rest assured, Memorial Behavioral Health is at the table working very closely with the agencies that they can, and just trying to bring it all full circle. So we have weekly meetings, we have monthly meetings where they're at the table with us. We get frustrated that they can't do as much as we want them to do. They get frustrated because we can't house how they would want us to house, but it is a working partnership, and we're hoping that it just continues to grow.
It's in progress.
Yeah, always. And I know that might not be the comforting answer, but it is definitely on the way. Okay.
Ms. Stein?
I read an article, I think several months ago, about the new facilities, the 22 units that you referred to that are being built. And there were a couple of things that puzzled me. One was that the location seemed unlikely. It seemed as if it was putting individuals at a place where they couldn't easily access food and things like that, but also the cost per unit was just extraordinary, and I don't understand
why it was something like $170,000 per unit, I think, you know, and I'm not sure whether or not that included the cost of the land. So, you know, if the cost is going to be on that scale, it's going to be fairly slow, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of that project is $5.2 million came from the state, right? So really, I mean, that project is in part an economic engine for our community, right? That grant going after it brought $5 million to create jobs, to build 22 units in our community. The reality is we won't be tackling that type of project without funding that comes from federal or state resources. You know, the city of Springfield was a partner in that for $800,000, but apart from those funds, you know, so when you factor out the per unit cost to our community from the dollars within our community, a great value. But, you know, that being said, those types of developments require us to go after funding from outside our community. The more, you know, more likely a lot of the growth will happen from working with landlords and developers and property managers, because renovating units, a lot of times that can be accomplished a lot less, you know, without quite the same degree of cost.
And to address your concern with where it is, that specific program will have case managers on site. That is the plan for that. And also our partnerships with the schools of nursing, that will be on site as well. That will be beneficial to helping people get their basic needs met and teaching those support programs that are needed to make sure the person learns things like how to catch the bus, how to use Uber if necessary, and also supporting them in getting to their appointments if needed.
It takes me a minute to get over on my new.
Thank you. I'm concerned with item number 3 on the core plan with a link with education. Education has many different definitions, some educating the community, but some educating the people in the homeless population. I'm wondering what current plans are active between Helping Hands and Lincoln Land Community College, because when I was a faculty member there, we had homelessness. We talked about what to do with it. When I was on the board of Helping Hands, we talked about homelessness, what to do with it, what could be done, what is being done in the area of educating those who want to pick up a skill, some sort of trade. Thank you.
Do you want to speak to that from Helping Hands standpoint?
I can. Insofar as what we're doing, we do push education. We do promote people getting education, but as you said, education looks different. Everybody doesn't want to go to college. Some people want to trade. Some people want short-term training school. So we do promote that. We have set up times for career advisors to come in and work with people that are in the shelter. So it's a process of getting those things around. One of the things you also have to understand is when your struggle is, I don't know where I'm going to sleep, or I've been at the shelter, that's not always at the top, but it is definitely in there. Case manager support. We've had case managers take people out to Lincoln Land and Capital City Career and different aspects of it, and working with Capital Township even to see what programs are available, because we've been presented with the construction programs and the highway programs and things like that. So we do what we can based on where that person's needs are.
I'll fill time. And we'll get to that. We talked about the plan, that we can all go out and read the plan. Okay, just to cut it short for everybody. If you each had the magic wand that you could implement 3 things within the plan tomorrow, what would those 3 things be?
That's like a dream question there that I don't have a great answer out of the gate for. I think the biggest thing is, enough units and enough case management. So I don't know whether I can count that as one, but a lot of these things that we're talking about, and I think Jill and Ricky both have kind of illustrated this very well. Mental health, education, working. It's hard to step forward in many of those areas in your life without a stable place to sleep. It's an amazing where having a stable, consistent place to sleep, the impact that can have on your mental health. And so first and foremost, housing first, right? I'd love to have a housing unit available for every person that needs it and the right supports to go along with that. Connected to that, I'd love to see enough prevention funds in our community. The best dollars we could invest in are stopping people from becoming homeless in the first place, especially families, so, and individuals who encounter that experience. The third part would be, enough funding to hire those case managers and the other people providing support to ensure that the system and the training and everything is there that the highest quality of care is provided. So those would be the three things out of the gate for me. I don't think my answer would change if I took more time to think about it. But
Can I say something on that?
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that when I got into my apartment, I had to readjust because I had been living in the streets for so long. I had to learn how to pay bills again. I had to call my daughter one day and ask her, how do I pay electric bill? Because everything had changed after 5 years, the smartphones, the computers, everything is done by computers now. And I was kind of lost. So I would call either Helping Hands or I would call one of the staff there and ask them what should I do about certain things because I didn't know how to do them. And eventually it would have led me to go back out in the street if I wouldn't have stayed firm and start to get people to help me to learn how to do these things again.
I would definitely answer into the units and the case managers. I think case managers are a very important aspect of it. I totally believe in the housing first model, but once we get them on the other side of that door, we have to have enough people, whether they be the case managers, the liaisons, or the advocates, to teach them the basic skills to stay. Getting in is really not that hard. The stability of it all is what gets difficult for people.
I haven't heard anything about the issue of people that are just hanging around, not doing anything useful. I have no way of knowing whether these people are homeless or not homeless. I mean, the best example is I go to the library, state library, just about every day, and there are tons of those people there. Anything about that issue?
I would say the biggest part of that, right? I know people in our community, that's one of the first things that comes up. The question is, are people spending time at the library because they like to be at the library? If so, great, right? That's a resource in our community that's available to anybody who enjoys it. If people are there because they have nowhere else to be, I would suggest that this whole plan addresses that, right? If you don't have a place to go during the day because where you slept last night closed at 8 a.m. or some other factor, then that's going to contribute to people with nowhere to go trying to find a place to be comfortable and out of the elements. And so if you have a home that is yours, you get to pick and choose where you go and when you go. And I think over the course of 5 years, if as a community we can build an effective system, that's certainly going to have an impact on likely where people spend their time.
I want to answer a part of that for you. People always ask, why do they go to the library? I've done the survey. They go to being at the library started with the female homeless. And the female homeless went to the library because they were safe there. There's cameras all around there. It's on a main thoroughfare, so they can get the bus if they need to. It's pretty close to the police station, so if anybody bothers you, you get immediate attention. Also, there's a clean bathroom in there. It's close to the bread line. It's close to the Washington Street Mission, and it's close enough to all the other agencies where you can get. So the library is kind of centrally located. So, and where there are women, men follow. So that is how the library got to be a hub. I spent a lot of time at the library assessing, and you have to look at it. The homeless look at us just like we look at them. And if you want to be safe, you want a certain kind of person coming around you. What kind of people come to the library? So where we're judging them, they're judging us as well. So you also have to look at the fact that if you're going to be somewhere where you want to be safe and feel safe and know somebody's going to look out for you, that's how the library became the homeless hub.
Who's next?
If there isn't anything from the audience, I have a couple of questions. You mentioned grants. Does the Heartland Continuum of Care have the capacity to write and receive those grants, or are those independent, whether it be the county, the city, a private developer? And if that's the case, how is that, if it is, coordinated through the entire effort?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, probably a complex answer. It really depends on the grant, right? I mean, there are for example, right now we're laying the framework to apply for a HUD grant to address youth homelessness. That's something that only the Continuum of Care can do, through our collaborative applicant. These developments for permanent supportive housing, those, a nonprofit can partner with the developer and go after those. They don't need the Continuum to do that. What we aim to do here is to provide support and capacity to help more organizations go after those types of grants. And connected to that, any kind of grant that might be able to bring more resources by adding additional staff to this effort. That's a big part of what we're trying to do, is improve the system so that we're competitive for those grants, but two, have enough people who are able to go out and find where those funds might be available.
John, question here.
Please.
Hi guys, good to see all of you. I'm, in a way, in transparency, I'm having a reaction to one of the previous questions, referring to those people and, people who are not using their time maybe productively at the library. And I'm wondering if you can speak, I know considerable work was done here on the equity front. And I don't know if that was mentioned earlier because I showed up late, sorry. But I'm interested if you could share a little more about just kind of that human factor. And Ricky, I'm so appreciative of you sharing your experience with us because you don't have to do that. And I think there's a lot of value in hearing from you. But what I'm reminded of, I've never experienced homelessness or even been close to it. But these are our neighbors and our fathers and could be our children. And so, when I think of the folks that are outside and unhoused and unsheltered, I think of their humanity first, and that you're meeting a human need. And so I'm wondering if any of you could speak to that. That kind of community of these are still our neighbors and these are still people that we might love and care about as well.
I think one of the important things to look at is that when we see someone out holding a sign or sitting outside the library or the church, we look at that person and our mindset goes to who they are right at that moment, forgetting that that person used to be somebody much different. Mm-hmm. We have somebody out there now that we're working with that won't come in who's a Harvard graduate. Mm-hmm. When I worked the shelter, I had a ophthalmologist that moved from California to be with someone. Registered in California, but now homeless and trying to get back home because they now have nothing because of choices that they made. Everybody that you see out there did not grow from a seed called homelessness. That person has a story, and that person has a background that would absolutely blow your mind. Yes. You have no idea. So we have to think about that, and we have to remember. One of my counterparts made a comment yesterday, somewhere along the way, we've lost our compassion and ability to see past what the external is. Because some of those people are parents and grandparents, and not necessarily bad parents and grandparents. So we have to look at where they were and where they want to be. I don't think anybody wakes up and go, hoo-hoo, homelessness is my choice and this is my goal. I'm going to graduate to homelessness. I don't think anybody does that. We have a lot of people who are dealing with mental health issues we would never understand. I tell the guys all the time, and it's about, like you said, humanness. Everybody's a mister. When I come and say, Mr. this, Mr. If I learn your last name, you're Mr. If I don't know your last name, I give you you're Mr. something. I'm going to give you a name to go along with it. Because a lot of times you don't get, when's the last time someone homeless has been called sir or ma'am? And that means a lot to people. For someone to look at you and say good morning, regardless of your situation. We have to get back to the compassion. We have to get back to empathy. And we have to get back to not judging people based on what we see. If COVID has taught us nothing, is that self-care is important, mental health is real, and mental health issues are real, and they look very different depending on who the person is and their coping skills. Everybody is not as strong as Jill. So we have to be very mindful of that. And Ricky is a perfect example. I would say last year Helping Hands had their first ever graduation. We decided we were going to make leaving the shelter and staying out there a year and doing what you're supposed to do celebrated. So we had a graduation, a real graduation. And for some of those gentlemen, it's the first graduation they ever had in their life. Because Springfield doesn't have an 8th grade graduation, and you didn't graduate from high school. So getting that diploma handed to you and standing there taking the picture and having the celebration, you know, graduating class member right there. So that is still got it. So we have to be mindful that they are people. They're not homeless, they're people. You're welcome.
Hi. It's been a couple of years now. We had a big rollout of a plan to deal with homelessness in Springfield. Very integrated plan, lots of pieces put together that all fell apart. My question is, what did they do right with the last initiative? What did they do wrong with the last initiative? What did we learn? What gives you confidence that 2 years from now, I'm not going to be sitting here listening to this same program again? What did you learn, and what gives you confidence that this is a better way to go about putting it together?
Sure. Yeah, I think that was a transformational moment for our community. Mm-hmm. And it was one of the first times that best practices were communicated to our community as a whole. So I think on the other side, while you might say, well, that project didn't materialize, there were a lot of Housing First initiatives that grew out of that are impacting people like Ricky, other people in our community in significant ways. And so while the center itself did not physically get built, a lot of those Housing First initiatives, there were seeds planted there that have begun to transform our community. So that would be one part of the answer to that. I think the question of, all right, we've done this several times. We've seen shelter projects grow and fail and get blocked and all of those types of things. These are questions for us as a community. Do you want to solve this problem or not? We've worked, we've come together with stakeholders to provide a plan. It cannot happen without community support. It cannot happen, this goal, Becky, you alluded to that, right? The goal is to create a system built on equity, and I think I skipped that in my opening, but built on that is a commitment to change. If you will support us, if you will work with us, in 2 years' time, we'll be starting to communicate how successful we're being and where we can actually get in 3 years. If the community says, there's that stigma, there's that piece, we don't think it'll work, then we can expect that the conversation in 2 years may not be greatly different. So I would say the system is ready, invest in it, support it, and you'll see results.
And I'm a believer in what's for you is for you, and that includes our community. And that plan not materializing at that moment meant it was not for us. But it also made people who disagreed with what was going on look at why they disagreed and have to answer to, well, what do you want? What do you think? Why do you disagree? A lot of people agreed to disagree, but they had to come to the table and discuss what is needed, because homelessness is not gonna go away if you just leave it alone. So I do think it brought people together who otherwise would not have come together to discuss, and I think it made people who sat around judging what was going on really have to be a part of an implementation to have some ideas to come to the table.
Time for one more quick question.
Okay, as I sit here and listen to these great comments, I think back of many years ago when I was on the Chamber of Commerce Board, and during the Mayor Dowling administration, he brought in a gentleman from Washington, D.C. that was in charge of the Intergovernmental Affairs Council, which is a federal agency dealing with about 13 different federal agencies. And as he discussed things, it was interesting that he talked about back when Kennedy was president, how there was a lot of mental institutions that we had in Lincoln, Illinois, and Jacksonville, Illinois. And there was new medicines that came out. So they closed down any of those facilities because they had great medicines available for mental health. The problem is a lot of people didn't take the medicine. They were on their own out on the street. And he was talking about some communities that established communities within their community, basically high-rise buildings that were vacated. And they would house people there because he said the solution to homelessness is to provide home. And they could do it so much more efficiently in a multiple dwelling rather than single family dwellings, which are not cost efficient perhaps, $4 million for single family when you can do it in high rises. But the big thing about the high rises was they had nurses there and they were required to come down beginning of the day after breakfast, take their medicine. And they also had a sense of community because they had duties, like maybe they'd work in a garden or maybe they'd help clean the kitchen. And so it was a real sense of community. So I think that we need some multiple family, whether it's a 4-plex or an 8-plex or, it doesn't have to be high-rise. Okay?
That's a great comment. And I think, one of the things you get on too is this idea of client choice. Like some people are going to say, you know what, I think, Ricky, I want to speak for you, but one of the conversations that I think you alluded to is that, this was a different experience for me to get into housing, and I liked knowing who my neighbor was and being able, like that sense of loneliness that can come from that, can be alleviated in a situation where people are living in closer proximity. But the key to that is choice, right? Do you want to live in that type of environment or something else? But certainly agree with you there.
Thank you. In an effort to make sure that we stay on time, I'm going to stop us here and ask you again to please give a round of applause for Josh, Jill, and Ricky. As a quick public service announcement, remember that November 8th is Election Day, and I want to thank everyone who has already voted and those who will participate between now and then. I was reminded we are oftentimes looking for coffee sponsors. If you're interested, we don't have a sponsor as early as January. Please look for me after the meeting. I was also handed a watch that we believe someone may have dropped on the way up. It was on the elevator. It looks like a woman's watch. If it's anyone's, please come to me. And I want to tell you about our next 2 programs. On November 18th, we will have our election review. And on December 16th, we will have a conversation with UIS Chancellor Janet Gooch, so I hope you'll join us. As a reminder, each of those are on the 3rd Friday of the month to avoid the holidays in November and December. With that, again, thank you. Thanks for a great turnout. I hope you can stay for a few minutes if anyone has individual questions, and obviously I'm here as well. So if you're interested in being a coffee sponsor, or this is your watch, come see me. Thank you.